Run it back. Let's try to make this all organic.
Let's not. No, we can't do it. No, I mean, there's only one organic thing.
Colin, I had a dream where I thought I created Gatorade.
The only organic thing is this peanut butter banana Cliff Bar featuring dark chocolate.
It's a lovely bar.
Look at it. Do you see the... Look at the details.
I know that that looks like a turd. I know that we are coming close to the end of the show, but we will take any type of advertising money that we can get Cliff Bar.
That's right. Yeah. Cliff Bars. It looks the same going in as it does coming out.
Oh, what a slogan.
Oh, welcome to the Hop-Ons podcast, a community review podcast sponsored by our Patreon supporters.
Yeah.
My name is Colin Cliff Bar Cox.
I was going to call you that earlier, and it slipped my mind.
Yeah.
It's me, John Phelps, creator of Gatorade. Colin.
That's a vaulted track.
It is. It's a very deep, hidden track. Tonight we are here to discuss Season 6, Episode 2 of Community.
Wait, you're getting ahead of yourself. You're clearly on the Gatorade. You have so much energy. John, we have a new patron.
Oh. Whoa!
Whoa!
Whoa! Whoa! Oh no! Who's the new patron, Colin?
We want to welcome Ming, who decided to support us at the $3 Brita level, and because of this, Ming has access to all of our exclusive Patreon content. If you want to support the podcast through Patreon, you can do so using our Patreon link. It's in the show notes. John, it's a great place.
It certainly is. There's a lot of wonderful content on the Patreon, and I highly recommend you go check it out. Colin.
John.
We are now on the Yahoo streaming service.
Correct.
And I know that we're going to eventually get to context, but we should say this is an episode of television that was directed by one Jim Rash, right? Co-directed?
So co-directed along with his Descendants writing partner, and I assume this person also won an Academy Award, Nate Faxon. So yeah, they both co-directed. They did the Russo thing, but good.
Well, no, they didn't direct The Descendants, right? Didn't Alexander Payne direct that? Am I wrong?
No, I meant, the way the Russos co-direct.
Oh, I see what you're saying. They did it good. Well, the Russos had some bangers.
But they did it good.
Okay. That's rude. Yeah. What are you talking about? The Russos' movies have made like billions of dollars. What are you doing?
Gatorade has also made billions of dollars. I don't know if I would call it good.
Let me tell you something. When you've been very sick, there is nothing like a Gatorade Blue Frost. Oh, wow. What a treat to my senses this drink was after I had evacuated everything that was in my body.
That's what it does. Yeah. Right there. I feel the same way about Cliff Bars, to be completely frank with you. Just... Wow. It's like a train. It just sends everything out.
This is a great episode. Anyway, what was the name of this episode? Virtual...
John,
what is it?
John, it's not there. It's not even close. We are here to discuss Season 6, Episode 2, Lawnmower Maintenance and Postnatal Care. This episode originally aired on May the 17th, 2015. John, get ready. On Yahoo screens.
Yeah, okay, so this is, I was looking up what we would have competed with, because this aired the same night as the previous episode. And
Correct,
first episode I did this whole Bacula in Time, which is a banger of a show, by the way, or
it's very good.
of a bit that I did. Colin, there's some shows that aired this evening that I have never heard of, and I want you to tell me if you've heard of them. Okay?
Please. Oh, so this is just like affirmative or negative. Yes, I have.
Yeah.
No, I have not. Correct. Okay.
The Amish Mafia.
I have not.
That's on the Discovery Channel.
Okay.
Married at First Sight. Have you heard of this one?
This feels like a reality TV show.
It is a show, and I looked this up. It's a show where two people stand back to back at the altar. They turn around and they literally get married. and then the cameras just follow them like, we hope you guys do okay.
I mean, it sounds like a Sunday at my old church.
Dance Moms I've heard of.
I think I've heard of that one too.
The Haves and the Have-Nots.
No, I don't know what this is.
I don't either. I was hoping you could tell me. Now, here's the one that I think that maybe you created in an alternate life. Discovering Lucy Angel.
I don't know what this is either. I'm sorry.
The name of the episode this evening, Colin, was Being Lucy Angel. So I feel like if we were on TV, we probably could have competed pretty well with these horrendous shows that are actually, I guess, real. I don't know.
Yeah, I know nothing about these shows, but the titles are not inspiring. I'll say that much. Yeah. So I think you're right. I think this wonderful episode, and John, maybe if someone's listening to this, they may want to know, what did IMDb say about this episode? Did they summarize this episode? And, dear listener, they certainly did. Jeff and Frankie ask an inventor for help extracting, that's a funny word, Dean Pelton from his virtual reality world. Again, single sentence, that is definitely the A plot, but there's a lot more to this episode.
Huh. Yeah, extracting makes it sound like we're in sort of a Inception situation, but we're not at all.
Yeah.
All they had to do the whole time, by the way, to get Dean Pelton out, just unplug the machine. That's all you had. That's all they had to do. They had to go to the wall and pull the power on it, and they go, "Well, that's it."
There is something interesting about the idea that every Christopher Nolan movie, one could use the word extract to describe really any moment in any of the plots. There's always at least 7 extraction plots.
You're not wrong. Yeah. One of the better moments of The Dark Knight's when he does the plane that picks them up on like the wire hook.
I remember.
And the sky hook that they used back in the Vietnam War. That was one of the most badass things.
Yeah. I mean, it was, but the way they describe it, yeah, because I think Morgan Freeman says something like, the U.S. Army used something called Skyhook. We could look into that. Skyhook. I don't know. That's not a good Morgan Freeman. I don't like Skyhook.
That was actually a very good Morgan. That was like a very pep, younger Morgan Freeman, which is wild because in The Dark Knight he's like 97 years old already.
He's very old. But that's in a montage sequence, so he needs to be peppy.
It does come in black. Anyway, Colin.
Yeah, John. Oh, man. The IMDb plot summary is a bit deceptive because we actually have 2 competing plots here. The A plot is this VR system that Dean Pelton purchases from this just spectacular character named Elroy Patashnik. Everything the man says is hilarious. We will discuss Keith David. And then we have this B plot with Britta. She's moving into the apartment with Annie and Abed. And I think this is something that I think you and I have always wanted, a bit of an explanation for why Britta is the way she is, and apparently it gravitates around her relationship with her parents. But John, I'm just curious, in general, what did you think of this episode?
It's a very, somebody has been going through like my likes and dislikes on Letterboxd, and they made this episode of TV. My favorite film of all time is The Thing, starring Keith David. That was his first film, is The Thing, and he's phenomenal in it, and I love that movie, and I love him as an actor. Also, the Portuguese Gremlins bit is one of the more spectacular things I have ever seen put to film. I love it. I would spend the whole episode talking about it if we could. I think that the episode, I don't think it's a particularly funny episode. I didn't laugh a lot.
Don't?
But
Wow.
I should, like, there's a caveat there is that the holiday week has fucking ruined me and my spirits, and I'm so tired. And so that probably has a lot to do with it. But it's a very enjoyable episode. Also, the Lawnmower Man is mentioned, which we should talk about the Lawnmower Man. I've read the story. I would like to discuss this with you. Do you know the story of the Lawnmower Man?
No, but I cannot wait to talk about it.
We'll get there. It's fucking wild. And I also I think this episode does a good job at putting Annie and Abed in sort of this like jester light, much like Troy and Abed were. They're doing some very funny things here. as well. We didn't mention the third storyline, which is Chang trying to figure out how to get to the school nurse throughout the
Fair.
whole episode because he's allergic to a cat and he gets just bit the fuck up at the very
Mold.
beginning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, yeah, but this is absolutely silly, insane episode. But I enjoyed it. Dean Pelton's doing a lot
Yeah.
of heavy lifting, I would say.
Dude,
But yeah,
I've watched this episode so many times. This is one of my favorite episodes of the show. Jim Rash is so weird and hilarious. Again, Keith David, everything the man says is a banger. And this is consistent, John, for the entire season. Everything the man says is amazing. I don't know how. I don't know what it is about Keith David, the choices he made, not just in this episode, but this season. I told you there is an episode near the end of the season when we learn that he became addicted to encouraging white people. And it's one of the funniest goddamn things I've ever seen. The way he's talking to white people at this wedding. At one point he shouts, "Now there's a man who knows how to marry his cousin." It's just, John, this man is so spectacular. I think a lot of, as I understand it, and anyone listening to this who likes Community can correct me, but I don't think people who like Community really like this season. But I would argue the inclusion of the Keith David character, Elroy, and Frankie, they're so incredibly funny. Whatever one might think about this season and how it relates to other seasons, these are two characters who are so incredibly funny and two actors who give such spectacular performances. I don't know how one cannot watch every episode and just find themselves laughing hysterically, because I don't think there's this overarching sense of coherency with the season. These really do feel like just episodes of television that to some degree feel disconnected from a larger narrative. But it's just so funny. It's just, I mean, the Dean is so weird and funny in this episode. When he does the yas, I just, John, it's the weirdest thing I've ever seen. And also the idea that they allow the Dean to be funny without it being a joke about his sexuality. I think that's also important because that's incredibly rare for this show, to allow him to be funny, but for reasons that are not parodies of whatever this show thinks about non-heterosexual people, I suppose. But John, I think a great place to start, because I know how much you like gaming and technology, we need to discuss virtual reality. Because I think I've seen a photo of you wearing a VR headset.
Yeah, you have seen a photo of me wearing a VR.
Talk to me about VR a little bit. Your overarching thoughts about it.
I have a PlayStation VR, and
okay,
it was a gift to me. My wife's family got it for me back in 3 or 4 years ago, longer than that actually, and I love it. It is for me, and I think people that like movies a lot. If you have the chance to get one and watch a movie on it, it's like life-changing because you feel like you're in a theater because of how huge the screen looks. That's one of my favorite things to do. There's no one who's ever looked good doing VR stuff. It does absolutely fuck with your center of gravity, with your equilibrium as a human. But I enjoy it. I can spend hours and hours and hours playing VR games and not realize I've been doing it. I did have it when I lived over. Colin's been to my old ass apartment when it's a very small place that I lived, and I had it hooked up there. And my friend Brad, who was like, remember when Shrek kicks the door open at the beginning of Shrek?
I do.
He's just that all the time, and he knocked a bunch of shit over off my shelves doing VR. But I love it. I will say the VR that the Dean is using is pretty bad. This looks tremendously bad. But I will say, if you've never experienced it, you can't say that it's shitty because you're still in this like cool, space. So I don't know. I think it's unique. They spent approximately, I would say, $10 creating these assets to make this world. I love how sparse it is, so much so that every time the Dean talks in game, it just echoes because there's no one around. because Elroy didn't know how to code things, so he just like put a floor down, and then the Dean just reverberates everything. So anyway, yeah, I like it. Have you had any VR experiences yourself?
No, not that I can think of. I think primarily because I just haven't had an opportunity to try it really, and also like I have some like motion sickness
Oh
light
yeah,
sensitivity. Like I think
yeah.
I told you this story. I watched my brother play Call of Duty once, and it's the first time I ever had a migraine in my life. Just watching him play this game, it was
Oh
just
wow.
so. Yeah, it was just a lot of things, and so I think my trepidation. It's probably because of that. I'm just afraid like I'll trigger a migraine or something. But I guess John, like, why do you think the Dean is so into this? Does this seem inconsistent with
Mm.
his character to find this as seductive and appealing as he does?
No, I think the Dean is a person who not so subtly has wanted like not necessarily power, but uh, um, control over things. Maybe I don't know, and
Hmm.
he's in this world where number one, this is a decision he made to buy the VR, so he's like he's I'm sure he got a demo of it and was blown away by the demo, and so maybe he wants to be like really impressive to people, and also he you could tell he got it just for himself. He doesn't give a shit about what anybody else thinks.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he just likes being like the king of this world. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense, John. I think that's really smart. I think there is because there is this thing he says at the end about which at this point it almost feels like a way he just punctuates a sentence when he says I want to be a good dean. But I think there is this I think you're right. There is this sense that he has power and control and perhaps even he seems competent. Now, it's not hard to seem competent because as Elroy finally admits, it's really just a desktop computer. You're just moving shit into file folders. The dean doesn't know that, but I think there is this. And again, I thought you would be particularly well situated to speak about this. I think there is potentially this way of thinking of one's virtual identity and the way that you can perhaps become someone or something else. You can embody a different persona. That seems quite consistent with the Dean and in particular. And again, I think this is maybe a more sympathetic and less satirical exploration of all of his costuming from previous seasons. It's not he's a queer figure and, you know, the gays like to wear funny costumes. Instead, it's he's someone who likes to explore identities, and he's not someone who is comfortable just remaining within a narrowly defined identity. And I wonder if now, again, Elroy's VR doesn't afford one this opportunity, but I wonder if VR does, because I think you could even extend it, John, to things like the kinds of like skins people wear in video games and how it allows them, or the different characters they create and how it allows them to embody different personas and really be different versions of themselves. I guess like I was thinking about it in those terms. Like this is perfect for someone who likes to explore the boundaries of identity in the way I think the Dean does.
Yeah, that's great. I've never, I don't think I would have thought about that deeply, but absolutely, I think, there are ways. I've never gotten into like the MMORPG stuff like Warcraft or even stuff like Second Life, where you have an avatar doing all these things. That's not been for me, but we've played Fortnite together before, and I think that's a game where I will buy skins that I think express my like the fanfics that I love and the properties that I love. I have like a Ripley from Alien skin. I have like Ash from Evil Dead skin, and I guess subconsciously I am trying to maybe say something with that. And I
Hmm.
think the Dean's just doing a lot more loud job at expressing himself more
Yeah.
than I would, I guess.
And like you're an incredibly whimsical person at times, and you'll choose these really whimsical skins, like the pancake head guy.
Oh,
Is
man
it
cake! I love man
man
cake. Right,
cake?
right here is his figures right there. I love man cake a lot. But yeah,
Yeah,
you're right.
yeah. No, I think
Uh,
about stuff like that, and like even people who are really committed to this idea, to this really strict gender binary, it's interesting how like they're always like female characters in video games.
Oh,
Like,
for
what does
sure,
that
for
maybe
sure.
say or suggest about you that perhaps you're not as committed to the binary as you think you are? So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Speaking of like VR, I mean, because it's mentioned there's a moment when um, Jeff is making fun of Lawnmower Man because that's what the VR looks like.
Okay.
Lawnmower Man was a film that came out in the 92, 93 maybe, and like set in a virtual reality world, and it looked just like this, like absolute dog shit. And Elroy, we learned then, was a consultant on the film, and he said that he he took he took Bridget Nelson to the premiere. That's what he said. We were building worlds upon worlds. So I've read Lawnmower Man, which is a short story by Stephen King. It's like approximately 4 pages long,
I didn't
and
know that.
it's got a whole sort of jaded history with the film. You know, he sued to have his name taken off of the movie because
Oh,
it
did he?
has
Okay.
it's terrible and has nothing to do with the story, the Lawnmower Man. So I guess the movie, from what I understand, is like got virtual reality, sort of demonic things, and also I feel like there's some type of like nuclear missile stuff happening in that. In the Stephen King story, which again is 4 pages, a man. This is true. This is what happened. A guy needs to cut his grass, and so he calls an ad in a paper, and this big fat guy shows up with a lawnmower, and the lawnmower starts running by itself, like it's mowing his yard by
Okay.
itself. And the big fat guy that comes is like, "Hey, you're gonna hear some weird shit outside. Don't look outside. Whatever you do, don't look outside." And so the main character, immediately looks outside, and he sees the lawnmower running by itself, and he also sees the fat guy naked, crawling behind the lawnmower, eating all the grass clippings off the ground. And so the lawnmower comes into the house and murders the man, and that's
Okay.
how the story ends. So that's
Okay.
the real Lawnmower Man, not the VR one. Stephen King did a lot of cocaine. Also, is something I should talk about.
John Goodman would have been great in that role.
You're not wrong. I read it as John Goodman. I've read the story a few times. It's always John Goodman in my brain. So
You know who I would cast as the lawnmower?
Hugh Grant, 90s Hugh Grant. I believe him. He had to do a bit of mowing.
He told you not to look outside, but I fear you did. So I must take a bit off your head. Yes.
Oh man, that's my favorite thing now. Is imagining
Yeah,
90s
no,
Hugh Grant.
it's John Goodman eating the grass and '90s Hugh Grant as the lawnmower.
That's a
It's perfect. Now,
lawnmower, a
this is
sentient lawnmower. Oh my god.
yeah. No, I agree. Stephen King probably did a lot of cocaine. It is interesting, like knowing that about the Lawnmower Man or the fraud adaptation history. I mean, I think that's important as well because we see this is something, and we can talk about Elroy in just a second. But I mean, when Jeff meets him and confronts him, he criticizes him for basically creating a an Angry Birds knockoff on an iPad.
Yeah.
And so like this
Yeah.
this really gives us a sense of who Elroy is. And I guess John, I would ask you if we wanted to maybe situate Elroy with the group, does he feel like a particular character? Because I think it's interesting
Ooh.
how similar he feels to characters like Jeff and Chang, I suppose. These characters who masquerade as something they're not.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jeff goes so far as to say it, right? He says something like, "I know what it's like to live your whole life as a lie,"
Yeah.
and for sure, I think Elroy is maybe sneaking into that Pierce role, but
Hmm.
he seems to be a lot more respectable about it than Pierce ever was. You know, Pierce was
Yeah,
just
that's
this.
really good. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Pierce was like, very misogynistic and insane, and did all these terrible things. But Elroy, like we see already at the beginning of at the end of this episode, is like started a redemptive arc, and we just met him, and so I think maybe that's where he's going into. It's like a mirror for Jeff, but in this regard, Jeff's the one who sort of convinced him of his ways already. Yeah, I like that.
And no, I think that's great, John. And it's interesting how scripted all of Elroy's responses are, as if he's responded to these criticisms in the past. And this is one of the first times that, well, it clearly worked on the Dean, but it didn't work on Jeff, because I think we've spoken about this before. Like, as awful and complicated as Jeff is, he can always smell his own, and he has no trepidation in outing someone for basically being like him. And that's exactly what happens here. But John, Elroy Patashnik, so another new character, and it's fascinating because Elroy only has 12 episodes in this show. Frankie just has 13, but voiced by Keith David, who has appeared on Community before. Do you remember?
I don't. I read that, and I cannot remember where the hell he's at.
So the Abed Troy Pillow Blanket Fort documentary, Keith David
he's the narrator. He's the narrator.
the narrator.
That's right. Yeah.
So I guess he technically has 13 episodes, but the character Elroy just has the 12. Do you have any additional thoughts about Elroy? And John, why the hell is Keith David so funny? Because he's not, I don't think he's trying to be funny in the way that, like, Shang tries to be funny, or that maybe anyone tries to be funny. He just seems to be, everything that he says is hilarious. It's just hilarious.
He's very good at just like completely adopting a character, like assimilating into a character. I've seen him the most in John Carpenter films. He's in The Thing, and he's in They Live with Roddy Piper, and they have like this 6-minute alley fight, and it's so fucking good. I could watch it all day long. He's also like, anytime I hear his voice, it's immediately the most recognizable voice
it is, isn't
one has ever heard.
He was in The Cape as well, which is important.
He was in The Cape. That's wild.
Yeah.
He's so good at figuring out where the comedy is, but also keeping the character grounded. And I think that is better than most of the characters in the show. Like, Chang is not a grounded character whatsoever. I think he's a lot more muted this season, and it works well. But he's not somebody who I would say like really has a character other than he's crazy. Elroy has already got layers to him. Like, I already want to know. There's the moment when Jeff goes in the Winnebago, and I noticed it this the second time I watched it. For some reason, he's just got motherboards hanging from his ceiling, and I thought, is he using this like to pick up, like, is this like his cool lighting for when ladies come over to the Winnebago? Is he shining lights off of his motherboards that are hanging from his Winnebago? I don't know. I just loved it. I loved how realized that was. It made me smile. It's great.
You'll really like in the next episode when we learn about this fictional 90s like alt rock band called Natalie is Freezing, and he like dated the lead singer who everyone thinks is named Natalie. It's like Hootie and the Blowfish. And like his response every time is like, her name's not Natalie, she's an artist. But it's really funny. Like, there's a whole cut sequence where Britta is drunk and she imagines that she's singing one of these songs. But John, there's something about the lines they give him and how he just has this remarkably high batting average, I guess is my point. Like, John, this line, to use a phrase I coined in the 90s, I'm going in. You coined that? Oh yeah. Lock and load. That's mine too. Like, how does he
You gotta
do that?
believe him, because he's got the voice. You gotta believe him.
Yeah,
when he
I think that's part of it.
When he says people have big meaty feet, that was my favorite thing. And Jeff said, I do not have meaty feet. Big meaty feet. Fantastic.
When he says, like, the Dean says the thing about worlds within worlds, and then we hear him say it, like, clearly that's how he pitched this VR system to him,
And it took probably less than an hour for the Dean to be completely obsessed with this man. Because he kept saying worlds within worlds.
You can do worlds within worlds. Worlds within worlds. Worlds within worlds, baby. Yeah, like that's...
Do you think Why do you think the deans keep saying Jesus wept? That's something I have to know.
It's like this like Alexander thing, where it's like there were no more there were no more worlds to conquer,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
I don't know. Is this from a movie that I just don't know? I'm not sure, but yeah, he
So
just keeps shouting Jesus wept.
there's a moment at the end of Hellraiser where Hellraiser's a fucked up movie, by the way. And if I tried to explain it, we'd be here a long time. But the antagonist is being hooked by a demon. Like hooks are all through him, and his body's like flayed out, like his skin's all torn up. And the last thing he says is Jesus wept. And he's like all like cabled out and stuff. So maybe this is like a bondagey thing for the dean almost, is like the amount of orgasmic pleasure he's taking from doing this. Maybe that's what it is. I don't
I
know.
mean, I'm checking right now. This is something that appears a few times in the Bible, maybe specifically the King James Bible. And
It's the shortest Bible verse. I was told that forever
oh,
in
really?
my youth. Yeah, it's the
I don't
shortest
remember the
Bible verse.
context. Yeah.
I do. Jesus stubbed his toe. You know, he's got those sandals. He's got terrible feet protection. So he's walking down the road, stubbed his toe.
God.
Jesus
Oh, yeah.
wept. Something that John remembered big
Silliest
time when he wrote that
the
book down.
silliest parable. Yeah, the silliest parable. No, I don't know. I mean, if you're someone who knows the Bible better than I do, please enlighten us. But I think it's also just a silly dramatic thing to shout, and I don't know why the dean would shout it. Other than like it sounds like the kind of thing it sounds like the kind of thing a character would say in like a mid-aughts action film, you know? So,
I do want to say really quickly, and I had a conversation with a friend of mine, my friend Nick, who was big in a community, and earlier you were talking about how people tend to dislike season 6, and
mhm,
before we move on to the Brita story, which I think that story could fit in any previous seasons, I
sure.
think this Dean episode, this Dean story, would only fit in a season like this.
Mhm.
And to me, for my money, I think the best community is seasons 4, 5, and 6. Honestly,
Mhm.
I think season 4 is like so. It's not bad. It's just so strange that I am fascinated by the production of it, and that makes the show infinitely more watchable. And then I think season 5, for me, they really hit a stride at some point, and the episodes just. I think I liked every episode in season 5.
Mhm.
It was just banger after banger, and they got to explore more like very like visual stuff and story wise stuff, and they seem to be a lot more ballsy in season 5, and they seem to be a lot more like taking chances and greater risks. Um, and this season seems to be in that same vein, and I think people that don't appreciate season 6, I think maybe you're living in like a weird past where you can't see the forest for the trees situation, because
Hmm.
this show is like hit where it needs to be. At least that's how I feel. I think the Dean has like adopted this perfect persona of who he is after these last 5 seasons. Jeff is becoming this like almost mature mentor character who's also still really like smarmy at the same time, and it's working really well. And I don't, for the life of me, I don't get a criticism of why people wouldn't like this season.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something I just to be completely frank, I agree with you. I love seasons 5 and 6, and I think for you and I, and again, like experience is important, I suppose. We are two people who, in many ways, formed a relationship around an appreciation of a show that tried to do what Community did. And despite all of our attempts to fit that square peg into a round hole, just kind of failed miserably. You know, like Arrested Development after season 3 is just not really worth
It's not
anyone's
great. Yeah.
time. It's not great. I mean, again, I think you and I have spent seemingly countless hours at times trying to champion seasons 4 and 5 as something worth watching. But if I were in an elevator without a microphone, I would just say, don't watch those. You could probably skip a lot of season 3 as well, which is really interesting and difficult to say. The
Yeah.
idea that a show like Arrested Development really only has maybe 40 good episodes. There's 40 good episodes, maybe. That's
Yeah,
a
no,
weird
I
thing to
agree.
say.
Yeah.
Community does something that, John, I cannot think of a TV show that has done this, where it resurrected itself after such a disappointing fourth season. And I agree with you. I think there's a lot about season 4 that's really interesting and redeemable, but it's not as good. But what it does with seasons 5 and 6, the way it's able to constantly incorporate new characters and those characters work, it's endlessly fascinating to me. And it's a different kind of show, but I don't, yeah, I find myself watching more episodes from seasons 5 and 6 than I do seasons 1, 2, and 3. And maybe part of it is, and this is something that you and I can discuss as we progress in season 6, the way the show addresses some of its maybe previous mistakes. And I think we've discussed some of them in this episode, the way that it treated the dean as a queer character. This feels, I mean, watch early seasons, all of those jokes feel incredibly antiquated because, I mean, the point, it seems as if, whether the show says it explicitly or not, the point is the dean is weird because he's not straight. I'm sorry. That's the point of all of those jokes. Whether any of the writers would endorse that reading, that's the point of those jokes. In the same way that with Pierce, Pierce says all of the sexist, homophobic, racist, anti-Semitic things, but it's fine because, it's a critique because Pierce says it. Instead, and I think you and I have a better reading, which is, no, you allow Pierce to say it because it creates a permission structure. You see the show addressing a lot of that in season 6, and I would even go as far as to say offering at times more interesting and mature comedy than what we see in seasons 1, 2, and 3. And I think that's part of what I like about seasons 5 and 6 is that it feels more interesting and mature to me, which is something that I think I just prefer, I suppose.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And yeah. So, look, can we talk about Britta, or do you want to?
I love this narrative. Yeah, let's do it.
Also,
I think
Gene
you and I-
Parmesan's here. Did you know that? Gene Parmesan showed up.
Yeah, this is like a Clue
Gene!
reunion for these two. Yeah, I
Oh,
know.
it is. It is. Yeah.
She also has what's Britta's mother's name? Leslie Ann Warren. That arson joke is one of the funniest things I've ever heard. That's so funny. It's such a spectacular line reading. But John, I think this is something you and I have always wanted, which is more about Britta. And while there's a lot of humor in this narrative, it's a narrative that it seems it wants to seriously explore and explain, for lack of a better phrase, why Britta is the way she is. And I find this narrative incredibly satisfying. This idea that Britta is a character really defined by her arrested development. And yeah, I know.
He said the thing. I love this narrative a lot also. When you hear the story, we figure out about Britta's parents, and Britta's parents are helping her. They're laundering money through her friends, so she gets it.
Yeah.
You would think that that's silly, but it is firing on 10 the whole time. Britta is a crazy person for this entire narrative. She is off her rocker in the best possible ways. There's a moment when she finds out that Abed and Annie know who her parents are, and they've been getting money from them. And I think Abed says they're very lovely people, and she simultaneously hisses and wants to puke at the same time.
She sounds like one of those gremlins, right? One of those Portuguese gremlins.
Chichu. It goes on and on, and it is so fucking funny. I love this narrative, and I love that her. The only thing she can think to do is freak out and get into Frankie's car because in her brain, Frankie is the only person that like has it together or is adult enough to figure something like this out. And
Yeah.
Frankie's response is, "Yeah, your parents are old and human, and they're gonna die soon." And that's enough for Britta to go, "Okay."
Yeah, I mean, I want to talk about the message Britta extracts from that really lovely thing Frankie says. But John, I think there's a couple of other things as well. Britta is really smart in this narrative, which is
Oh,
something I
she
think
is. She is.
we've discussed how if you watch early season 1 episodes, Britta seems intelligent and capable, and she knows exactly who Jeff is. I think that's part of the pleasure of the pilot is Britta's she's masquerading as something she's not to trap Jeff. Um, she seems equally intelligent and savvy in this narrative, and I agree with you. Also, like simultaneously completely unhinged. But I also think this narrative, because you could imagine, well, why pair these narratives together? Because this is something I talk about this all the time. I do like A B plot mirroring. I like the idea that a well structured narrative allows the B plot to comment on the A plot. It accentuates it in some ways. And I wonder if you could argue that Britta, in some respects, sees and understands herself, and really everything that she's experienced to this point as a kind of simulation. It's a fabrication. What she thought she knew was the truth was really just something akin to like a virtual reality mask. And
Sure,
I
for
think what's
sure.
also nice about this, it helps to explain maybe a critique that Abed offered in the previous episode, because now we know how this is one of those grounded questions that the show answers. They're able to pay for all of these things because Britta's parents have basically been subsidizing all of them because I mean, I think part of what I like to imagine, or part of how I like to read this, is they're not just subsidizing Britta, they're really subsidizing this group in a lot of ways, like in like possibly spending tens of thousands of dollars a year just so these people can remain friends. And I think there's something really sweet about this. I don't know why. I mean, we all need I think we all need people to help us, and I think part of what has defined this group in a lot of ways is the lack of structural support they've received, but knowing that maybe for at least a couple of years Britta's parents have been like subsidizing all of these activities. I think that's really sweet.
Yeah, it's like the anti-Friends where you never know where they get their fucking money from
Yeah.
to live in these massive things, these massive apartments. And here, you know, they have a benefactor
They have
that's
a
been
benefactor.
revealed as
Great.
like revealed as one of the study group's parents, and they're like, you just take some money because you can't be homeless. You have to eat food. You know, you
Yeah.
have to do things.
Yeah.
And I love that we're never told what that her parents do. I used to assume that they're just boomers who
Just rich
got
boomers,
got
man.
lucky. They're just rich boomers.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that they
When the
went
vax
through
became
a
available, like first ones in line. They got that
yeah,
vax, baby. Yeah, you know, like they
absolutely.
get it all, man. Yeah.
They went from like Woodstock hippies to helicopter parents because they were so concerned that Britta would turn into them as Woodstock hippies. Back to now they're like the sort of open-minded liberal
Yeah.
parents who, you know, for all their faults, I think I would much rather have that as my parents than anything else if I had to
Yeah.
choose.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think that's a really nice point, John. I hadn't thought about that before. The idea that that Woodstock reference maybe is more significant than perhaps the episode wants to give it credit because it doesn't really linger over it. But I do again like how this narrative, because I have a lot of sympathy for this idea that parents and children have competing narratives about the lives they spent together, especially during those formative years. I cannot imagine what my parents or my family would think if they actually heard what I thought. You know, like I can't imagine. Like in the same way that I'm sure you and I have spoken about this before. I wonder what your father's narrative is. And like I cannot imagine it agrees with yours.
Yeah.
But and that's not to say that like let's relativize everything. I think some narratives are just truer than others, you know? Like
Yeah, for sure.
hey, if you're an anti-Semite who has, you know, like a swastika tattoo, that doesn't make your narrative right. It's just, yes, you have that narrative, but that doesn't make it right. But I think about this. I think about these narratives that parents and children have. And I like, so this gives me the sense, because I agree with you that regardless of what happened in the past, it does feel like they are and they have tried to be whatever Britta needs them to be, I guess, as parents. And I think
Yeah.
there is something lovely about that. I mean, this sense that they are adaptable, I guess. And I think that's something we don't often think about people their age, the idea that they are adaptable.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, again, it gives everybody else in the study group time to shine as these, like, sort of just comedic outliers that we haven't really had in a while. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
especially, like I said earlier, Abed and Annie being this, like, duo of just, there's just like a comedy duo. There's so much
So
Abed
funny.
and Troy, where they're really funny,
Mm-hmm.
trying their hardest to, keep Britta at bay, and also trying to fight how much they love Britta's parents. At one point, they're like playing trouble with them in their living room and having tea. Um, Annie is I love how much on the same page her and Abed are, and is trying to, like, distract Britta from figuring out the truth at the beginning. When they talk about roommate movie night, and how they're trying to hide how the couch came. It's really lovely to see the two of them not have this serious, super, elongated story, and they just get to be the comedy here, and it's
Yeah.
quite lovely. On top of Britta also doing marvelous job at being completely fucking bonkers. She's
Yeah.
wonderful in this.
There's so much excellent physical comedy in both narratives. And I
Yeah,
think
for
something,
sure,
John,
for
like
sure.
you made a point that I think that we should at least emphasize. It's something the show doesn't really address that often. You think it would, but characters like Jeff, Pierce, Annie, Abed, they have such terrible, contentious relationships with their parents. And we learn little bits and pieces why. I mean, Abed, basically, his mother abandoned him for her new family. Pierce, we know everything about Pierce and his father, Jeff and his father. Again, it's mentioned tangentially, but the idea that Annie's mother in particular basically abandoned her when she wanted to do something that her mother didn't want her to do after realizing and reckoning with her drug addiction. So I think and Jeff even uses this language support network, which I think is so pointed because I think again one of the subtler points the episode wants to make is like a lot of these characters again don't have these support networks, but I think what's important for Britta is it's entirely possible that they've only become a support network recently without her knowledge. It's entirely possible that they were not a support network. And again, I think that harkens back to what I said earlier about parents, children, the narratives they have about one another and how difficult it is. And I think this is also incredibly important and interesting how hard it is to reverse those narratives. Like it's so much easier and more convenient just to remain situated in a particular narrative about a person. But I think this episode, there is this sense of hope at the end that people can shift the stories they tell to themselves about others. And I think that's, well, I I hope that's true, you know?
Yeah, no, I do too. I mean, for my sake, I hope that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this for me, for my money, I like this story more than the VR story. I think Britta is a
Yeah.
character that deserves to have more screen time. And again, with season 5 and them, having to think outside the box, because a lot of the tropes that were there before are gone, and I appreciate that about the show. I think one of my least favorite things about early seasons of this show will they, won't they things with Annie and with Britta and Jeff, and I just did not give a fuck at all about any of that. And now it's interesting to see them have to do like Greendale things, and that's where I want them to be. I'm very
Hmm.
selfish in that way, so that's a me problem. I'm aware of
Well, you
that.
can be. I mean, but I think John, what's really interesting is like I agree with you, and this is something that I've said before about the show. One of the things I like about um, later seasons, but I would even argue, like, I think you're right. There's a lot of like romance narratives, a lot of coupling narratives, but compare it to other shows, not nearly as many as you see in like
No, no, for sure.
comparable sitcoms. But I totally agree with you. Like, John, at this point, there's no like romance narratives to speak of, yet they're still able to tell interesting stories. And that's something I, again, really appreciate about seasons 5 and 6, the dearth of romance narratives, but in its place, something that I think is maybe more interesting at times. Maybe showing and demonstrating a kind of creativity with the construction of stories and not just relying on, you know, romantic tropes and romantic narratives. I dig it. I dig it so much. Yeah, there's none of that really in season 6 in particular.
But what is in season 6 is Portuguese Gremlins, which
John.
what's happened? What is happening with
It's
these fucking bumpers?
Yeah, hey, what's your what do you think? I want to watch this movie so bad.
It's really well done. It's very grindhousey, which I'm
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
Uh, my favorite moment comes from number one, like the soup monster made me, dude.
Throw the salt on it. That makes them even angrier.
That makes him multiply when he says "monster de sopa," "monster de sopa," and he throws salt on him. I lost my fucking shit. But when they say, and then they call him knee-high mischiefs. What can
Yeah.
stop the knee-high mischiefs? The old man who sold him the gizmo said me, and then he has a shotgun, and that's what stops him is just point blank shooting them with a
Yeah.
shotgun. Fuck me, dude. That's some good stuff. That's top notch.
I mean, it reminds me of the Santa Claus movie from I Think You Should Leave.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fuck them. They said that. Fuck them.
Yeah.
I don't give a shit. I don't give a shit if I die. Everything
what,
sucked
what,
lately.
what does he call it? What kind of gumbo? He calls it a
A
gumbo.
cosmic gumbo. And he says, "I've seen every dick on the planet." That's a good. That's some good shit. Oh man. Anyway, Portuguese Gremlins, 10 out of 10. Would recommend. That's been probably my favorite bit of weird shit they've ever done is Portuguese Gremlins. Are you laughing at? I've seen every dick on the planet. Yeah.
It's so weird. Oh God. One last thing that we didn't discuss. Elroy, he saves the dean, jumping back to the A plot,
Oh
and
yes.
we we learned that he apparently will start taking classes, and the dean calls this the Greendale effect. And then Jeff, perhaps in a moment of depressed realization, says, I'm never getting out of this place. And the dean says, I've met few who do. Do you have any thoughts about because like all of this implies that like the dean was like recruiting Elroy, which I mean he clearly didn't have that plan, but I think just
Yeah.
this language, the Greendale effect. I didn't know if you had any thoughts about this.
I don't. It's interesting because when I watched it both times, I never felt sad about that moment with Jeff.
Yeah.
Number one, it did make me feel like the dean was a lot more. We should give Dean a lot more credit than we
Yeah.
give him, especially at being able to see the quote unquote losers to choose from.
Hmm.
He even is able to called shot exactly when Elroy's going to turn around and join Greendale. And I think that line where Jeff says, "I'm never getting out of here," To me, I think that is just more or less Jeff's understanding of how much he loves Greendale. That's what I got from it. I didn't take it as
Yeah.
a sad place. I took it as like a quite lovely place. But
Yeah.
that's my take on it.
I mean, I think you and I have spoken about this. Jeff's inability to commit is really part of what defines him as a character. But I think you and I, from the very beginning of this show, have discussed and really described Greendale as a place for losers, but in this deeply affirmative way, that it's a place that um, seems to gravitate around this idea that everyone here is a lacking figure and there is no outside of this place because there's no figure of exception. There's nothing outside of being lacking. Greendale is I mean, I've discussed it as, when I think about forming communal groups, we should form it around that idea that we're all lacking figures, and like the lack should be the thing that defines us. And that's part of what I like about this moment. Again, is you're right. There's something so seamless about it. It's just, Elroy, of course you belong here because everyone belongs here. And the people who don't think they belong here, they'll get there. They'll get there at some point. And I think we need to think of that in an affirmative way, not in a negative way. And I dig that a lot.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
completely
beautifully
agree.
said, John.
I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I like that. That's good.
That's all I have to say about this episode.
That's all I have to say. Yeah.
Shall we
Segmentos, as
Segmento.
George Sr. might say.
Segmentos.
Brodero.
Where is Hermano? Mi hermano está aquí. Son of a bitch. That's one of my favorite parts. Anyway, let's go.
John, I need to know who makes the Dean's List. I need to know who is your best performance.
Wow. I mean,
Wow.
you can really give it to one of the two. Oh, wow. You could give it to the Dean, or you could give it to Britta. I think those are your two options. And for me, I give it to Britta. She is, when Britta gets on the kid's tricycle, after screaming, "Stop infantilizing me." Infantilizing me. That's a great moment. It made me laugh a lot. When she hisses at Abed and Annie is 10 out of 10. That's my favorite. I love it. What about you?
Yeah, when she shouts, "Mom, shut up," like a teenage girl. Yeah,
it's great.
I think I'll choose the Dean. I find his physical comedy spectacular. So, but I respect and I affirm your choice as well, John. I also need you to check the syllabus. Now, this is where we identify our favorite bit of metatextual referencing and intertextual play. What do you got?
For me, it's the Lawnmower Man, a strange reference to a terrible, terrible movie that made me smile immensely. It's the Lawnmower Man. Colin, what about you?
I think mine is this small little reference to Elroy making a far less interesting and effective Angry Birds on an iPad. Just like the number of shitty video games, it's like you just made a shitty version of this better video game, right? Yeah, I think that's, and like you could imagine this game appearing in ads before your YouTube video. It's like, does this game even exist? Like I don't know if this game exists, but yeah, it's an Elroy Patashnik joint. So I think that's mine.
An Elroy Patashnik joint. Colin.
John.
Best lines. I don't have any. My favorite was Chang is great when Chang has his hand under the couch and he's getting bitten and he's just normalizing and describing it. It was one of the more funny things that I've seen. Also, Abed trying to figure out how to console someone.
Yeah.
When he says, "Should I do this?" Okay, I'll do this.
Yeah.
So good. Let me hear your best lines. I know you have a bunch.
I have a few. Britta's a rich millionaire with superpowers, and she's going to live on our sofa for no reason. That's the thing Abed says. A hole in your head is something you don't need, she says through a hole in her head. That's a Frankie Dean exchange. I set the time zone. My phone does that automatically.
That's great.
And Jesus wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. Jesus wept. Stop saying Jesus wept. That's an exchange between the Dean and Jeff. Dude, this is really funny. Abed says this when Britta returns from taking that phone call. Are you strong or angry? And she says,
Oh, that
my
was
parents.
so good. Are you strong or angry?
Jeff says this to Frankie, you keep white Morpheus in the Matrix. Jeff's, I eat love, Britta. Hot, delicious love that you were willing to wipe your ass with. That's very funny. I designed a system for gods. That's an Elroy line. Dude, this is so fucking funny. It's an exchange between Britta and her parents. We sent you a birthday card to your apartment in New York, and the next week you're setting fire to a Jamba Juice in San Jose. How long is that going to stick with me? Until arson is legal, sweetie. That's such a, what a funny line reading. Dude, absolutely. All the boys would be swiping right. That's something Britta's mom
that's
says.
great. Yeah.
Oh my God, I put a tilde on this N. I can do anything.
That's so
And
good.
he just
The tilde.
elongates. Yeah.
So
and to use a phrase I coined in the 90s, I'm going in. You coined that? Oh, yeah. Lock and load. That's mine, too. He says it with such confidence. I've never said anything with such confidence. Oh, Frankie's You Have a Lovely Home.
Oh, that's so
Spectacular.
good. That's
You
so
have a
good.
lovely home. Did you catch this thing Chang said when he saw Elroy? When he's in the
Oh, he says
hospital?
Troy. He's like, Troy's
He
back.
says, "You're back, Troy."
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, John,
So
that is
good.
our conversation for very good for season 6, episode 2 of Community Lawnmower Maintenance and Postnatal Care. John, we have a Patreon page.
Yes, we do. For $3 a month, you can hear all our exclusive content. Hop on over there before we end the show. Idiots. Calling for $7 or more. You become producer of the show. You get the content. You get a sticker so you can show everyone how much you love us. Above that, you are a producer. You get a shirt, a sticker, all the content. Above that, who knows? I mean, we could go into a VR game together if you want. Not a sex one. Well, that could be on the table. We'd have to discuss it, I guess. We'd have to have some rules up front. But if you want to do that, the link is the first one down there in the show notes under all like the hubbub stuff. Then you see the Patreon. Click on that.
Yeah.
Throw some scratch our way. Hear all the amazing content. That's how easy it is.
The safety phrase is there's always money in the banana stand.
Yeah,
If we
absolutely.
hear that, we turn off the VR headset or pull out. John, we would love to thank our patrons. Thank you to the following. Thank you to the following patrons for not pulling out: Katana, Crindy, Rachel, Kate, Daniel, Lars, Rob, Robin, Jeff, and Andrew. I don't know if I can cut around that. We'll find out. Yeah, if you want to support the podcast, it's the first link in the show notes. John, the second link in the show notes. We have lost the thread. The second link, if you want to help us find the thread, it's to our Threadless page. You can buy Hop-Ons podcast merchandise. I guess I'll need to keep that because the thread reference won't make any sense. I got to keep all of this now. John, and finally, if someone were so inclined as to rate and review the podcast, what would you say? What would I say?
I would hope this is not your first episode. But if you do rate and review the show, it really does help us get noticed. Don't mention sort of the breakdown that we just had. Don't mention that in the review, but all the other fun stuff. Oh, I love these two schlubby fucks or whatever. Put all that in. Other than that, that's all I have to say. Thank you for listening to the Hop-Ons podcast. Until next time, sweet babies. My name is John Phelps.
I mean, we're here at the end. I'm just eating the rest of my Cliff Bar. You're getting some nice ASMR, crunchy mouth sounds.
Some crunchy turd chews. Colin, I'm going to go ahead and hit stop on this. Love you guys.
Yeah, no, see you, buddy. Bye.